Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I am joined by Kev McCluskey and Laura Bradburn to discuss Dundee United 0, Celtic 2. Someone said at half-time, relax, patience, it's only half-time. Kev, they were right. It was Donny Boy, wasn't it? And he was absolutely spot on, wasn't he?
Exactly. Wise words spoken by Donny Boy, if that is who it was. Exactly. Yeah. I think at half time, a lot of the emotion that was going out around was about that VAR call.
Yeah.
And I think that probably scared a lot of people's thinking about that half, maybe, because we didn't actually get a chance to talk about how we played. And we were pretty dominant in the first half. The only thing that was lacking was a goal. And if that incident hadn't happened, if the keeper just comes out and wins the ball cleanly, or whatever, and we don't have that incident to talk about, I think we have quite a calm half-time discussion about how we're on top, we're creating chances, half chances, and if we just keep on doing what we're doing, it'll come. And as Donny Boy says, have patience, have faith in the process, and we'll get there. The goals will come, and that's exactly what happened in the second half. We just went out there, we kept on playing our game, our style, imposed our way in the game. We get 2 quick goals within the first 10, 15 minutes of the half, and it's job done. And the rest of the half was pretty straightforward, really.
Yeah, you're right. Barry McCluskey, welcome to the show, Barry. I hope you're doing well. You are commenting on the YouTube channel. Surely we can come up with something better than Seven Nation Army as a song for disappointed. Talking of songs, I heard just as the players were coming off the park at Tannadice there, they were playing a B-side from Oasis in their absolute pomp. The song, of course, was Acquiesce. And if you look at the definition of that, it's accept something reluctantly but without protest. Did we do that on the VAR in the first half? Laura Bradburn?
Listen, I accept when I came on at half-time, I was caveating an awful lot of what I said by saying, I don't really know what the rule is, like, somebody update me, blah, blah, blah. But, like, I've looked it up, and honestly, like, I'm even more convinced that I was correct in a lot of what I was saying. So the point I made about Liam Smith standing on the ball and VAR getting involved to reverse that decision, I was totally wrong about, because I've read it up, and apparently it only applies to goal or no goal decisions, penalty or no penalty, direct red card, or a case of mistaken identity. So that's fair enough. But going back to the original penalty decision, point 3 of the IFAB rule says the original decision given by the referee, which in this case was to award the penalty, will not be changed unless the video review referee clearly shows that the decision was a clear and obvious error. Now, I think you can debate whether you think it was a penalty or not. You can make a case one way or another whether you think it was a penalty or not. What I don't think anybody can say is that his decision to award that penalty was a clear and obvious error. He saw enough there to call it a foul. And I don't think any video assistant referee sitting in a room can look at that and go, well, there was no foul there. Because as we've all talked about, there could have been a foul from the goalkeeper, there could have been a foul from the defender, there could have been a foul from both. To me, a clear and obvious error is awarding a penalty when there's been no contact, or awarding an offside when the player's not offside, or something like that that's black and white. In this case, it wasn't black and white, and so I think the referee's original decision should have stood.
See, that's what I love, Laura. You make a point, you think, you know what, I'm going to back this up with evidence, and you've gone and done it. And that's a very interesting point that you make there, because it wasn't clear and obvious, Kevin, that there wasn't an infringement. I mean, we even spoke about that at half time, not to labour the point, because, but it just wasn't obvious.
No, and if it goes the other way, if the ref doesn't give the penalty, does VAR pull it back to get a review because there's a clear and obvious mistake and it should have been a penalty? It doesn't. It wasn't clear and obvious. So whether it's the right call or the wrong call, the original one should stand in that case.
Right. I'm going to bring up a couple of points here now. Kevin Graham did, in fact, Stockroom Tim, predict that AJ's form was going to dip after a bit with his initial good form. I think that's natural. We were talking about this in the studio actually during the game. And, I think the arrival of Johnson has really softened the blow of us, losing a quality player in Juranovic. Nobody's denying the fact Juranovic was a quality player. He had a bit of that cultiness about him that the fans really took to him. And he's left without much disappointment, it's got to be said, Laura. I mean, I've said it before, I don't like quality players leaving Celtic, but it was almost like, right, he's ran his race, we've got a replacement, let's move on. But the one thing I would say to that is, if and when AJ's form dips a wee bit, you've got Tony Ralston, and Ange's been bigging him up and his attitude up in the last couple of weeks as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you watch Johnston and Taylor doing the Scottish slang video during the week, then Tony Ralston might not be too happy with that one. I think the phrase "glaikit" was used to describe him at one point, which was a bit unfair. But whether he's glaikit or not, he's a good enough right back to come in for Alistair Johnston, that's for sure. I'm just more disappointed that Greg Taylor didn't know what glaikit meant, having been born and raised in this country. But there you go. But no, I think like you say, the arrival of Johnston and the way that he seems to have slotted in and the attitude he seems to have to the way that Ange wants to play is absolutely ideal. It's exactly what you're looking for. I do think Kevin's got a point in that his form was always likely to dip, not least because of the way that he plays. He's so energetic, gets up and down the pitch so much. Not everything's going to come off for him, and therefore there are going to be situations where a backup's needed. But as we've seen from Tony Ralston, he's a more than adequate backup domestically. And as far as European football is concerned, I still think he can do a job for us. So yeah, I think Juranovic, losing a player of that quality is always a blow, but it's certainly not the blow it might have been had we not got Johnston in.
I've seen people, Kevin, maybe cynically, saying that we are replacing players with lesser players, but I don't subscribe to that. I know Juranovic had a particularly good World Cup, but this is his peak. This is Juranovic, hitting his peak at this moment in time. We replaced him with someone else who was also at that World Cup. But the difference being he's got quite a few years on Juranovic. So I don't subscribe to the fact that it's a backward step, maybe even a sideward step. We've brought someone in who is more than capable of, fulfilling that particular position. It's more of a specialist position now that we use it as an inverted fullback. But it's not as though we've pulled out a rookie card here. This is someone who's got the experience. He's got the international experience at the highest level. And I think over the piece, we're all been pretty happy with the performances of Johnson.
Yeah, I think so. I think when you sign a player to replace someone else, the lowest quality that you're looking for is that he's of the same standard as the player that he's replacing. Ideally, you want someone that's better. Johnson, at the moment, from what he's shown, for me, is shown enough that he's at least at the level of Juranovic. He's 22, 23 years old, something like that. He's got lots of potential to grow and become an even better player. He's international level. He's played at a World Cup. He's had other interest in him outside of us, but he wanted to come here because he was going to get his first team football and a chance to prove himself in Europe. I definitely don't think he's a backwards or a sideward step. I think he's a signing where he's going to come in. He has seamlessly transitioned into the team just now to the point where Juranovic isn't a distant memory, but the loss has been massively softened. And yeah, I think, as he grows into the team, he will only become better. I don't think it's a backwards or sideways move at all. I think he's someone that's going to prove himself to be a really useful member of the team. And on top of that, he comes in and he's another player that will help Anthony Ralston become a better player, because Ralston's going to have to raise his game again to get back in. So I think there's so many positives and knock-on effects from this, but I definitely wouldn't have any negative thought about Johnston coming in with what he's shown us so far.
No. The thing with Ralston is, I've said this before as well, he seems to be someone who is low maintenance. You know what I mean? Any player that's been out of the side for the best part of a year under a collection of different managers, yet who still turns up for training, who still takes the loan deals when they come up, and whenever they are asked to perform, he goes out there and gives 100%, Laura. It's one of the things that we can become so focused on the razzmatazz, the performances and the goals and everything else that we're watching. And in the background, you've got a guy in Tony Ralston who You know, this time next week, if he's asked to do a job, he'll step in, no complaints, and he'll do it. And he'll step in. I think there's only been one occasion where he looked a wee bit rusty at Fir Park last year. He tends to just step in as if he's never been out the team. He's a real asset to this squad.
He's a really good example of, you know, sometimes I think we as Celtic supporters forget that not every player that comes to our club falls in love with it to the extent that we are in love with it for obvious reasons, and therefore isn't happy to be a bit part player and wants to start every week. Tony Ralston, I'm sure, would prefer to be the starting right back for Celtic. There's no doubt about that. But other than that, he's living every Celtic supporter's dream. He's a Celtic footballer. He's part of the first team squad. He gets to play when there's a job required of him, and he gives his utmost when he's asked. That's all you can ask for from the guy. And I think also because he's so down to earth and because he's, you know, a local guy and seems pretty humble from all accounts, you can sometimes, I think, downplay his ability as a footballer. Now, don't get me wrong, he's had to improve massively because of some of his early performances, but I do think he's a better footballer than he's sometimes given credit for. There's no way Ange Postecoglou keeps a player around if he doesn't value them as a footballer. We've seen what happens. We talked about it before the show. If you've not got the right attitude or the ability, he'll have no problem with sending you on your way, and he hasn't done that with Tony Ralston, so that should tell you everything you need to know about him.
I'm just checking here, Laura, because he makes his debut in 2015. Yes, I am squinting my eyes because I'm half blind. 2015. So he's been in and around the Celtic first team now for 8 years. That's astonishing, isn't it? When's his testimonial coming up?
Oh, who knows? Who knows? If there's some other players that I think if they get a testimonial, he certainly deserves one, and I think he'll probably get one at some point. And like again, the record books are not going to show a massive number of appearances for the amount of time he's been a Celtic player, but he's going to be fondly remembered by Celtic supporters because of the way that he's played and some of the goals that he's scored. We've talked about it often enough. Back in that terrible season of 2019-2020 and the season after, Ralston being on the pitch was an indication that you were in for a bit of a torrid time. Now he's anything but. You're pleased to see him there when he's there, and every Celtic supporter feels like they've got a representative on the pitch playing for them.
For sure. I mean, you know, going from Tony Ralston to another homegrown talent in Callum McGregor. And McGregor made his 400th appearance tonight. And I've often spoken about the 500 club. Tony Ralston, in fact, has made 78 appearances for Celtic. So he could maybe get a testimonial after about 200 appearances. We'll wait and see. But McGregor made his 400th appearance tonight. And I think it's worth noting, and I'm going to go back to the Bernabe discussions that we've had. It's worth noting that Tony Ralston, Greg Taylor, Callum McGregor and Aaron Mooy, all in this team, have all come in for a bit of stick at certain points of their Celtic career, albeit Mooy's career's not been that long at Celtic Park. But they came through it and they proved themselves to be at different levels, real assets to Celtic Football Club. And I think I was feeling a bit last week for Bernabe. I know he wasn't involved tonight, but I was feeling for him, Kevin, because he's been getting a bit of stick. And as soon as Taylor comes back, we all knew he's going to drop out because he's not on the same level as Greg Taylor. But we can't write players off as simply as that. And I think that the likes of Ralston, even McGregor making his 400th appearance tonight, shows that we just can't write players off as easily as that.
Aye, absolutely. If you focus on McGregor for a bit, so he went out on loan to Notts County, and I think they had an option to buy him. I think they wanted to sign him. They couldn't afford him. I'm sure there was something like that. He was a player who could have easily disappeared when he was 19, 20 years old and gone and played in the lower leagues in England and been lost to Celtic. Then he's come back. It's Ronny Deila that's given him his chance. Mm-hmm. He's a player who was prepared to wait for his chance and take it. So, I mean, you can't write players off so early in the career. Where are we going with this one? You just can't afford to do it because it's foolish. I think we put too early a shelf life on players there. That's what I was trying to get to with this one. We
Yeah.
put too early a shelf life on players, and we think that by the time a player's 19, 20 or 21, if he's not a first team regular, then he's never going to make it. And that doesn't have to be the case. Players can get more time now, I think, to develop and grow into teams. And if you want to bring it to Bernabei, he's a young lad. He's moved from South America to Glasgow. It's a big culture shock for him. It's a big change. He's come in as a second choice player at Celtic behind Greg Taylor. I think Jared made the point during the week on the Friday show that you then can't expect him to be coming in and putting in first team, first class performances straight away, because he's going to have to bed into the team anyway. You can't expect him to play 2 or 3 games a week after not playing regularly for months. So you've got to manage players like that and just gradually bring them into the team.
Mm-hmm.
It helps that we've got a Taylor in front of him who's going to take a lot of that burden off him. But yeah, like, don't overburden players. In 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, players are still learning the game. They're still learning their trade. Bernabei, I think for me, has shown enough that going forward, at least, he's a really good prospect. Defensively, I've got some doubts over him, but he's young enough that he can learn that side of the game. So, you know, there is a bit of just kind of lay off the players at time and let him actually find his way in the team. And if he isn't good enough, if it proves that over time he isn't good enough, Ange will get rid of him, because he's shown that already, that he's going to take that ruthless streak. Conversely, if he is good enough, and Ange is seeing it week in, week out in training, I think he and other players will be given the time that they need to go and fulfill that promise and become kind of regular starting players. And they'll get to the level that they deserve to get to by putting in that effort.
The key thing there, I think, Kevin, is what we spoke about before, that ruthlessness. It doesn't matter if Ange has brought the player in, if the player's in on loan, if they're not meeting that standard, he will remove you from the football club. And the fact that he's obviously sticking by Bernabei for the time being would suggest that he thinks he's got what it takes. And hopefully we will see him flourish, as we saw Greg Taylor flourishing in the same position. Stockroom Tim, you're back in. We fought hard for a scrappy win away from home in January. I'm very happy with that. Can't always be silky football, but there was a wee bit of silky football on display, Laura. I mean, some very good performances in there. And of course, happy to see O coming on and making his debut. Maybe not enough for us to make any kind of judgment on his performance, but it is good to see him in. And again, a bit like Johnson, we're getting the replacement in before inevitably Giakoumakis leaves the building.
Yeah, just before we go on and talk about him in a little bit more detail, D. Macklin for me in the comments has won the competition for what the song should be. You're the one that I want, you are the one I want, oh. That's got to be it for me. I would love the fans to be singing that one, but he looks promising. He looks really mobile. He looks like I don't want to say like a unit. I've seen more physically imposing players than him, but he certainly can hold his own. He looks like he can deliver a ball, but he was also taking up really good positions in and around the box. I think it's only a matter of time before he scores his first goal, and I'm always one of these people that for strikers especially, I like to see them get that as quickly as possible and get the monkey off their back as far as that's concerned. But you can tell why Ange likes him. He looks determined. He looks like a hard-working player. He looks like he wants to play at an intensely high level and with high intensity in the way that he plays, the same as most of the players that have come in that Ange has signed. So I think he looks like another find. It will remain to be seen whether it works out for him, but I'm pleased with what I've seen so far.
Yeah, for sure. It was just fleeting so far, but it is good to see the physicality of the player, Kevin, in that short appearance that he made, that cameo. And obviously, he's a player that Anne said was the one that he wants. You see what I did there, Laura? He was the player he wanted. I'm not going to start singing. I'm definitely not going to start singing. But again, I'm more impressed with the fact that we're just doing business so well. We're getting the player in. Giakoumakis, we probably expect him maybe even tomorrow or the next day for an announcement to be made on his future. But we're doing it the right way around nowadays, aren't we? It's one for you,
I'm
Kev.
not sure who that one was to.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, it was a dummy.
Yes,
It was a dummy, and I've just Passed it to you.
You told me a dummy there. Aye, brilliant. Well, if it's a dummy, it's landed at the right man. I'm telling you. Yeah, it's great. Thank you, Laura. It's great to see us actually doing that for a change. Actually, being proactive in our transfer dealings, because so often in the past we've been that bit reactive, and it's you've almost felt at the end of a transfer window or during one that there's been no plan as to what we want to do at the end of it and how we want to come out from it. Now with Ange, we're doing business before the windows start, even, and we're getting players lined up that they're coming in so that on the 1st of January or the 1st of whenever the summer window starts, there's players coming in. And you can see that there is a bit of a process now, and we're going. I see you're laughing, Laura, probably because you're hearing Pirlo in the background now. We're seeing that there's definitely a process now, and there's a plan of attack as to how we want to approach a transfer window, the strength and depth that we want coming out of it at the end, the strength in the positions that we want, and we're going after top targets now. And he's been saying this now that the players that he's getting in are the number one targets, and that's refreshing to hear, rather than us having to go and maybe get the second or third choice. It's really refreshing. It's great to see that we're actually being proactive and being ruthless and doing the thing of cutting a player if he's not going to have a future at the club, cutting a player if he thinks his future belongs somewhere else, and not letting players dictate to us how our policy goes. We're now dictating out how we want our policy to go.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you use the word ruthless, you need to go back to Beaton and Rogic. You need to go back to the way Ange dealt with that situation, It was just like, I think we were a wee bit surprised when that happened. Exactly. And talking about radio silence,
two players
Laura,
you would have thought.
Yeah, you would have definitely got.
Two players you'd have thought would absolutely have stayed and had a future at the club.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Laura, we're talking about radio silence. It happens to the best of us, doesn't it? I mean, obviously, people have a little button that they can press if they start panicking because it was too quiet. And I was on Off the Ball a few weeks ago. It was on Christmas Eve, actually, and a question was thrown at me, and I didn't realise it was for me. And I'm sitting admiring their mic. I'm going, I might get one of these for the studio. That's nice. I turned around and everybody's looking at me. I was like, I better speak. What was the question? There we go. Lovely. Right, Tori Davarin, beautiful avatar, a lovely top. That's one of the ones that became better as the years went on, because at the time it was quite controversial. Perfect second half to steady the nerves, some lovely football, a couple of goals and chances. Great substitutions, all topped off with some minutes. Absolutely. And yeah, it's great now that we've got a player, we need to bring in a song, because JP and I get slagged off for talking about music too much on a Thursday. Music and football is intrinsically linked.
I don't think anybody's got a problem with you talking about music. It's the music that you talk about that's the problem.
We're going to do a Boys Own special for you, Laura. A Boys Own special. But, listen, talking of Boys Own, it brings me to mind, Christy Dignam is obviously battling cancer at the moment. It's not for the first time. Lead singer of Aslan, big Celtic fan. Thoughts and prayers with him and his family. But he was offered at one point from, is it Louis Walsh, the guy that used to manage Boys Own and Westlife and all that? Is it Louis Walsh? He was on the...
That's correct. Don't pretend you don't know that.
I don't, but I was waiting for you to confirm it because I know you're a mega fan. Bringing back memories of Johnny Depp, mega pint. You're a mega fan, right? And he offered them like life-changing amounts of money to buy his two best songs, but get a co-write on them. And wee Christy wasn't having it. He wasn't having it. He says they're my songs. So fair play. One of the best gigs I've been to in recent times was Aslan. So thoughts and prayers with the wee man. Autumn Glow. Jota was good today. Mooy and Maida are fast becoming my favourites in this team. Now, let's have a wee chat about that. We were talking about writing players off. People were writing Maida off, Laura, earlier on this season. And when Mooy signed, he was instantly written off by quite a number of people, it's got to be said. Some people on Acsom weren't sure of him. Two tremendous examples of why not to write a player off. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think it's again like a perfect example of the type of players that Ange wants around. In some ways not spectacular, in some ways not a Jota or a Kyogo or an Abada that at their best can get you off their seat, but players that you can rely on in and out. Maeda Sometimes starts, sometimes comes off the bench, sometimes isn't included at all. His intention when he comes onto the pitch is always the same, and his desire is always the same. Whether it all comes off for him or not is almost beside the point. The fact is that he gives you 100%. I nearly said 110%, but that really irks my dad. So he's watching and he hates when people say 110% because you can't give more than 100%. But anyway, he gives 100%, and that's absolutely to be commended. Mooy is honestly, like, I struggle to remember a player who's, I'm going to say, turned around their Celtic career, even though perhaps he's not turned it around, he's just kind of grown into it. I can't think of a player who's done that more. If you'd said in August that we'd be sitting in January with Aaron Mooy being one of the most vital players in our squad, I think most people wouldn't have believed you. But he's gone to the World Cup. He's had an absolutely fantastic performance. He's obviously come back with his confidence through the roof. And what's even better than that is so many players come back from the World Cup with confidence and then don't apply it for their clubs. He's applied it and more for the clubs. And he's been so often the driving force behind a lot of our victories recently. I've really, really enjoyed watching him. And I didn't have an overly negative opinion of him when he joined, but he certainly massively improved my opinion of him in the last few weeks.
You know what I loved about that was he went to the World Cup, Kevin, to prove to us as Celtic fans, to prove to himself, to prove to Ange. He wasn't going there to try and get a big money move. He was trying to get a game for the team he had just signed for. And he has turned into an absolute mainstay. And I've said just last week there, had you told me a few months back that O'Reilly would be on the bench and Mooy would be starting, I wouldn't have believed you. But he is. He's a first pick nowadays, isn't he?
He has to be now, yeah. You get so many players, and we had one in Juranovic who went to the World Cup to earn his move, like you say, and Mooy's gone there with the kind of the opposite intention in mind of, I'm going out there to prove to my current employers that I deserve to be there, that I deserve a place there, and that I'm better than what they've got. I need a really good World Cup. I am one of those ones, I think, that on here that was not overly convinced by him in his performances pre-World Cup. I thought at the time, a good squad signing, but I hadn't been blown away by what he'd done pre-World Cup. Since he's come back, he's one of the first names in the team sheet now.
We'll let you away with that, Kevin, though, because you called Taylor first, so yeah.
We've all had bad calls, Laura. We've all had bad calls.
That I called Taylor.
I wasn't going to bring Diego Laxalt into the conversation, but it's a Sunday night.
Laxalt.
It's all happened. We've all had it. Happens to the best of us.
Thank God I'm not on Twitter anymore after that.
No, but you're right, and it's actually really refreshing to see that he's gone out there with the intentions of coming back to do the best for his own football club, not to try and get a move away. And by the way, I don't blame Juranovic. I don't think he's a mercenary. We've had a lot of mercenaries at the football club over the years. I don't put Juranovic in that category.
Juranovic was one of those players who's reached a certain age in his. Juranovic is one of those players who'd reached a certain age in his career where he knows he's got one big move left in him, and then he's got a World Cup to go and try and prove that he's worth it. So you can't blame him for that, really, for going after it. And as I say, with Mooy, it's the opposite way around, and he's actually had to go there and displace a boy that was kind of first reserve for the Danish team. In O'Reilly, he was very close to getting in the Danish World Cup squad, and who previously everybody's raving about has been probably the best centre midfielder that we've got behind Callum McGregor. And now it's the other way around. I mean, we spoke before some of the games. We were going, which one do you play? Is it Mooy? Is it O'Reilly? There's a bit of a toss up there. Now there's no decision to make at all. Mooy just walks into the team, and O'Reilly's the one that's got a real task in his hands now to get the jersey back.
How do you manage him now, Laura? How do you manage O'Reilly? Because obviously Mooy, you don't drop him. And I think that was maybe a decision that Ange might look back on and regret against Rangers, Mooy dropping out. But how do you manage O'Reilly now to make sure that he doesn't completely lose the momentum that he's built up?
Listen, I think if you were to ask Ange the question, he would probably say there's no managing to be done. You're a player at Celtic Football Club. You can't expect to be in the team. It's up to you to work hard to get back into the team. And I like his approach as far as that's concerned. He's not a manager for putting an arm round guys and mollycoddling them in any way. They should know the position that they're in is a very fortunate one to be in, and it's up to them to improve that situation for themselves. Other managers might say, I'll sit him down and have a talk to him and tell him his opportunity will come. But you can't guarantee an opportunity for a player who was off form before Mooy replaced him and has been replaced by a guy who's playing some of the best football of his career. So Ange isn't in the business of providing players with guarantees that he's not going to keep. And I think that's exactly what he'll do with O'Reilly. He'll look at the situation. If Mooy's form drops off and or O'Reilly's form improves, then one will be out and one will be back in, and it'll be as simple as that.
For sure. Listen, it turned out to be a very good evening for Celtic, 2-0 against Dundee United, and we maintain the 9-point gap at the top of the league. Thanks everybody for getting involved, peaking at 700 live, which is unbelievable on a post-match. Thanks everybody for your support ongoing. Along the bottom of the page, we continue to advertise the fact that we recorded a charity single for St Mary's. The Glory and the Dream is always going to be available. So we will share that link underneath the video, and every single penny that we raise goes to Celtic's birthplace. We don't intend to take any cash for the recording fees and the video fees, etc. That's something that we've obviously put up. Every penny that comes in goes to St Mary's, the birthplace of Celtic Football Club. If you want to come along and see the whites of our eyes and see Acsom live, there are some tickets available for Danny McGrain underneath this video as well. This is January, the end of January, so next month we've got Tom Boyd and Martin O'Neill. One question, I'm going to give you a wee second to think, Kev. One question you could ask Martin O'Neill, Laura, if you got the opportunity, what would it be?
Probably, does he agree with me that the haircut Sibbald was sporting for Dundee United is a red card for violent conduct?
But by the way, that was so quick. Well done. And yes, I certainly think it is. And this is coming from someone whose hair has been the subject of much criticism in the past. What about yourself, Kevin? If you had one question to ask Martin O'Neill, what would it be?
I mean, how do you follow that question?
That's a belter. That's a belter.
It's going to have to be about Roy Keane's beard then. You know, is Roy Keane's beard the best in world football? There you go.
I don't know. I think Brian McClare's is up there. Brian McClare's beard is absolutely furious.
I don't know about Roy Keane's beard, but his tash is pretty strong. He's get rid of that, but the tash was pretty good.
How can he pull off a tash and Jota can't? I wish he would shave that off. Anyway, coming from a man who's never in 44 years been able to grow either, I think that is the end of the show this evening. Thanks everybody for getting involved, and thank you to Kevin McCluskey and Laura Bradburn for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.